The MixTape Challenge is part of This Week in Podcasting, a network that brings together music, television, entertainment, and pop culture programming all in one place. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/thisweekinpodcasting. You are tuned in to the MixTape Challenge, the music discovery game show podcast where contestants challenge each other to create a 4-track music mix based on a different theme every episode. Today's challenge comes to us from the MixTape Challenge vaults once again, and we're calling it Pleading the Fifth. Each contestant must create a 4-track music mix of guilty pleasures. That's right, we're all putting ourselves out there on the line tonight for your amusement. I'm your host and contestant, Jeff Hulit, and as always, we have 2 contestants here along with me for this challenge. Let's meet them now. First up, Mr. Jamaal Green, filmmaker extraordinaire. How are you tonight, Jamaal?
I'm doing fantastic, Jeff. Thank you for having me, sir.
You are more than welcome. And Jamaal, why don't you tell the people out there what you're working on lately?
A couple of things I'm working on. My big project I'm working on with a partner of mine. We have a production company called MG Cinecraft, and you can find us at mgcinecraft.com or just search MG Cinecraft on any of the social media platforms. And we're working on a project called Manny Congo, and believe it or not, we've been working on this for about 2 years. And what Manny Congo is a piece of historical fiction / fantasy set in pre-colonial 9th century Africa, about the founding of the Kingdom of Congo, which is like present-day Angola, Gabon, and like Democratic Republic of Congo. It's about how 5 kingdoms united to become one empire, and it became the last of the great African empires before colonialism took over. It started off as a graphic novel book launch that my partner and I had last year in Tribeca. It started as a book because when my partner approached me with the idea and we were going over it in our heads, we were like, we would need $20 million to make this. We thought to ourselves, let's make a book, hardcover book with great illustrations, show people what we're trying to do, and maybe even turn it into a video game. And it's pretty cool. So, and we thought it was about that time, especially now with Black Panther just kicking the door open for a lot of the old tropes that we weren't allowed to get over. It's a fantasy, lots of action, lots of gore, and it's based on the legend of the first king of Congo called Lukeni. And you can find, samples of that on Facebook as well at Manny Congo. And so that's our big project we're working on. We shot a sizzle reel out in Hawaii, and believe it or not, the big island of Hawaii has the closest environment that we could find outside of Angola to match it. And we're in the middle of editing it now and doing some effects work and what have you. So that's going pretty well. My other project I'm working on is a web series called Chronicles of, and I've been toying with that for a few years, and that's kind of more of a straightforward crime thriller being shot in New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. And you can find that on Facebook at Chronicles of. We're about to shoot our 4th and 5th episodes next month. So far, it's going really well, man. For anybody that's into crime thrillers and a little bit of supernatural and, blood and gore, well, this is probably it for you.
Nice. Yeah, I've seen a couple of your earlier Chronicles, and they're excellent. Jamaal's an excellent filmmaker, so definitely check out Jamaal's stuff, and we'll come back again at the end of the episode and give you some of those links over again. Our second contestant is a founding member of my Star Trek podcast from way back when, the Tricorder Transmissions. Podcaster, music fan, Mr. Craig Cohen is here tonight.
Hey, Jeff. Hey, Jamaal. Good to be with you guys.
Yeah, great to meet you too.
Likewise, man.
Yeah, this is kind of cool. Man, Craig, are you working on anything lately? I know we do some other podcasts together, right?
Yeah, I mean, in addition to the podcasting, I have a couple of things that I'm working on that I'm not really ready to share yet.
Ooh.
But I do have a web presence that I'm pretty proud of right now. In the last couple of years, I've kind of developed a really big appreciation for the Ramones, one of the most underrated rock bands in music history, in my opinion. So I've been keeping a blog about all things Ramones, and I try and highlight, do like a this day in history of news related to this band that's been broken up for now over 20 years, and all the original members are dead. But it's been cool kind of doing the research and looking up memorable gigs or gigs that have good set lists or available audio and video that's out there. So you can find that over at ramonespinhead.blogspot.com.
Nice. Well, I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to say you're not going to have any Ramones on your guilty pleasures list tonight, right?
Actually, I found a way to work a Ramones related song in. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
All right. A little spoiler there for you guys out there. So before we jump into our mixes, we do a segment called What's on Loop, where we go around and talk a little bit about what we've been listening to lately. Jamaal, anything been stuck in your MP3 player?
Yeah, lately, two things, and they're kind of not related. I've been listening to a band called the White Lies, and they're out of the UK, out of London, and they're calling it I don't know. There's so many microgenres now. I don't even know. For me, it's just if it sounds good, I listen to it. That's just the bottom line.
Right.
And they're calling I think they're a postmodern punk. I think that's the phrase I read. But I like their sound. They're very smooth. They got a great clean sound to them. It's very, very listenable. Even the tracks that aren't my favorite, that I don't love, it's still listenable all the way through their entire album. It takes you on a journey. That's one. Second, I've been listening to a guy named Micheal Rose. And Micheal Rose is a reggae artist from a hugely popular classic reggae band called Black Uhuru. And Black Uhuru rose to fame, I would say late 70s, early 80s, after Bob Marley passed away. They were the band that kind of took the reins, and they were on fire for a while in the early 80s, especially on the London club scene and back in Jamaica. And they've got a really, really just different sound. And this guy, Micheal Rose, is in his 50s now, and he's going solo, and his stuff is great. It's still modern, his type of reggae, but it's great sound. He hasn't lost it at all. So that's kind of the two things I've been kicking around.
Very cool. Mr. Cohen, what have you been listening to lately?
I've actually really gotten into a lot of live bootleg recordings.
Nice.
And one thing you can say about the internet, and the internet's done a lot of good. It's also created a lot of problems, you could say. But I think in terms of making live music from a certain era accessible,
yes.
It's been great for. We probably all remember the days where you used to have to go to record shows and spend $20 and upward on probably a cassette of a show that you weren't even sure was going to sound good.
Yep.
And now all that stuff's accessible, and people are, pretty much trading, via, their websites or sites like the Internet Archive. So I've got probably hundreds now of bootlegs of, a lot of rock music from the 70s and 80s, Kiss, Black Sabbath, Ramones, of course, Led Zeppelin. And, I think these bootleggers, for lack of a better word, I think these guys are really like the unsung heroes of music in the 70s and 80s, because there were some guys that were, taking really big steps to make sure they were capturing these shows. And I have a lot of soundboard stuff, which is pretty easy, but you have, for lack of a better word, professional show tapers. And I mean, there's some really good stereo recordings out there that were done from the audience. So I've really been enjoying going through and finding out what's worthwhile and what's not, for each of these bands that I've been following, and, really sort of noting, which ones are worth putting into my regular rotation. So the other cool thing is, sort of exploring the city they played in and the venue, whether the venue's still there or not, what other bands played there. So it's kind of like sort of, jumping in a time machine kind of, and I've really been enjoying it.
Nice. Yeah, I gotten into a phase like that last year, year before, downloading tons and tons. I found this Pink Floyd specific sharing group, and there were just, not only were there, tons of things I had never heard before, but there were upgraded versions of old bootlegs that I had bought on CDs and tapes at record shows and in stores. It was pretty exciting, man, to find that stuff and how much more available it's become out there. It's just a treasure trove for anybody who wants to go looking for it now.
Yeah, and the frustrating thing is, like, you look at like some of the soundboards that these bands probably have access to, and one band I will point out that's been really good about releasing their old live shows digitally is the Rolling Stones.
Mm-hmm.
They've put out probably close to a dozen live shows from various eras in their career. But you think about these bands, probably, Jeff, like Pink Floyd, how many soundboard recordings do they have in their archives that, a lot of fans would probably buy if they put out a proper release?
Yeah, no doubt. And there's several legendary ones that we know that they have that they refuse to release. But I mean, they're all out there, on the bootleg circuit, and you can get them. But obviously, they would be better quality if they were nicely remastered from whatever master tapes they're sitting on now and put out in a proper release.
Liner notes, man. I don't get it, but like you said, at least it's out there and it's accessible for us. And I really do, really think that a lot of these professional show recorders, they really should be extended at least some kind of gratitude, because some of this stuff would have been lost.
Oh yeah.
Lost forever.
Without a doubt. I mean, how many times each show has its own personality,
mm-hmm.
and the same song could be played at 10 different shows and be awesome in 10 different ways. And I remember, my dad is an insane record collector, and I mean, he's got records older than myself and my brother. My brother's 46 now, and I always wonder why he would have 12 different live recordings of one artist. And it wasn't until I got older I realized why. And he would have, just for example, he would have Bobby Blue Bland, live at the Apollo, Bobby Blue Bland and live in Memphis, Bobby
Mm-hmm.
Blue Bland. And it's because each one of these recordings had such a different character to it, or they would play something a different way. And I 100% agree with you, Craig.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, a lot of times it's like how the musicians were playing off each other that night,
Mm-hmm.
and then also what kind of vibes they were getting from the crowd.
Right. Exactly.
Kind of reminds me of my What's on Loop segment. This has just brought back a memory for me too, because this is the band that I was going to talk about is similar to that with their live performances. So I've been in a pretty mellow mood lately, and I've been spinning Iron and Wine's 2017 album, Beast Epic, super mellow stuff. It came out in August of last year, and I loved it, but it kind of got lost in the shuffle of a bunch of other new music that was out around the same time, and I really wasn't in that mellow frame of mind at the time, and I was listening to more upbeat stuff, and it's kind of cool because it's a return to form, not quite all the way back to the lo-fi stuff, the demo type stuff that was on his first album in 2003, but more akin to his first more polished acoustic album in 2004 called Our Endless Numbered Days. Some really great Americana stuff. Polished, mellow acoustic stuff with Sam's awesome songwriting. He's another great lyrical storyteller. I know, Jamaal, you love storytelling in songs too. We've talked about that before. And, a lot of relatable themes, brilliant use of metaphors. 11 tracks on the album, and they're all really solid. So really great record. But, jumping back to the bootleg stuff, this is a guy whose first couple of albums were all acoustic, him and a guitar, maybe a little bit of a backing vocal or something. And then he kind of went full band for a while. But when he went full band, his live performances would start to get varied up. He would take some of the old acoustic numbers and do new arrangements with full bands. So you download a few of his live shows, you hear the same song done 3 or 4 different ways on 3 or 4 different days from the same tour. And it's fascinating to go and listen to all these, because you see the set list. Oh, well, the set list looks the same, but it's actually completely different because he has all these different arrangements. Sometimes he'll do a song from an album that was one of the band records, and he'll come out and do it solo acoustic. So you have a completely different take on it. And the songs take on a whole different personality that way. I'm glad you mentioned those bootlegs, Craig. You got my wheels turning.
Oh, cool.
All right. So you guys ready to jump into our mixtapes?
Sure.
All right, so we'll start talking about our guilty pleasures here. Let me take a quick spin of the mixtape challenge wheel to see who's going to get to go first. All right, here we go. Looks like Mr. Cohen is up first. Sir, tell us the title of your mixtape and a little bit about how you pick the songs and the order you put them in.
All right. The title I came up with is Listen Like Nobody's Watching.
Nice.
And I really appreciated this challenge, Jeff. It ended up being a lot more, I want to say, challenging than I thought it would be. I'm going to go back to something Jamaal said, where it doesn't really matter what the music is if you're connecting with it. And I kind of think that guilty pleasures are like that, too, in the sense that something you might consider a guilty pleasure might not really be considered hard to listen to by somebody else.
True.
And so I kind of started to approach this with the idea of I came up with sort of a theme and then tried to work my way backwards. And as I was exploring my choices, it kind of morphed, but it still sort of kept an overall theme. And I think as we go through the list, maybe at the end, I'll kind of explain what that theme was. So if you want, I can jump into my first track.
Yeah, sure. Track 1. What is it?
All right. It is from 1968. It's a band called the Ohio Express, and it's track 1 off their self-titled second release. It's called Yummy, Yummy, Yummy. And you might remember this as a bubblegum pop classic, or you might not. It's been used in a lot of pop culture things. There's quite a few cover versions. You might have heard it in The Simpsons, Itchy and Scratchy movie episode.
Oh, yeah.
It was on an episode of Monty Python's Flying Circus.
Wow.
Time Magazine ranked it number 8 in its list of top 10 songs with silly lyrics. And this was the first song that I came up with for my list, because my original intention was to kind of approach this with song choices that were fabricated. And the Ohio Express isn't really, from everything I've read, it was pretty much a songwriting duo, and their performers kind of came in and out, and the name sort of worked for many, many different incarnations of the band. So it wasn't an organic thing. So I knew I was going to try and explore the bubblegum genre, and looking at things that were fabricated sort of appealed to me. And Yummy, Yummy, Yummy jumped right out. And I also think the song is catchy as hell. And, you know, I think it's a good first track for this mix.
Yeah, it's stuck in my head already.
Sure is.
Jamaal, any thoughts on Yummy, Yummy, Yummy?
Yeah, I always wondered who the band was that played that, and I know I've seen it. You've heard it in a million food commercials, and I think in South Park in one episode.
Probably it's got a big pop culture history.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's extremely catchy.
Yeah, I'm sure I've heard this many, many times. My uncle was big into novelty records when I was a kid, so I'm sure this is one of the ones he would spin up for me. And of course, it is very popular. I mean, I'm sure I've heard it in TV commercials before, and usually just the little chorus snippet part of it. But it is pretty damn catchy, I have to say. Mm-hmm. And definitely a good guilty pleasure pick. A good pick to lead off the list with, Craig.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Are you ready to move on to your track number 2?
I sure am. And track number 2 comes from 1970, and it's another self-titled album. It was this band's first album on MGM, and it's One Bad Apple by the Osmonds.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Osmond song. Wow.
And I got to tell you, this was a song I didn't even know was the Osmonds until about, I'd say, maybe 2 months ago. I always thought this was the Jackson 5.
Yes, so did I.
Yeah.
And I'll continue, Craig. I thought that was the Jackson 5.
And once I realized that it wasn't the Jackson 5, I was like, oh, this is a guilty pleasure song, because this kind of fits in with that fabricated idea, because this is the Osmonds trying to do the Jackson 5. So I think it kind of tied into my concept. And I realized also that this was a potential guilty pleasure this week when I was constantly singing the chorus at work when I was, trying to think of songs for it. And we brought up the video on YouTube, and nobody else in my office would acknowledge that this was a good song. And I said, oh shit, this is really like, so this is a bad song. This is a guilty pleasure. And then I thought it would fit nicely as my number 2.
Very cool. Jamaal, thoughts on Bad Apple?
The funny thing, when I found out that this wasn't Jackson 5, it was by watching. I'm a sucker for all those VH1 movies, like the 4 Hour Temptations series they did, and the Jackson 5 series where they had Freddie Boom Boom Washington playing Joe Jackson.
Yeah.
And I just remember a scene where he was ranting that the Osmonds were trying to be the Jackson 5, and I couldn't, for years I didn't understand what the hell is he talking about. So I started searching all these Osmond songs, and that's the song that came across. Oh, I get it.
Yeah.
I think I had seen a special on the Osmonds at one point. It might have been a VH1 thing, but I remember this song being highlighted in there. It was a fairly good charting song for them, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a pretty big hit for them.
So another excellent pick. We'll make sure to get all these on Apple Music and Spotify for all you guys out there. If you haven't heard any of this stuff before, you can go and listen to them and have a laugh on us.
Yeah, it was actually the number 1 song on. It hit number 1 on Billboard, the Hot 100.
Wow, that high up. Ready for track number 3, sir?
Yes, and now track number 3 brings us to the Ramones connection.
Nice.
And one of the things I was disappointed when I initially accepted this challenge is I wasn't going to be able to figure out how to work the Ramones in, because when we talked about this show, I was like, oh, that's going to be a challenge within a challenge, will be a way to figure out how to work the Ramones into any challenge that I accept. And it wasn't until yesterday that I figured out that I had a whole album that I could pull from. And I don't know if you guys know too much of the history of the band, but their principal songwriter, or, the driving force of that band from a songwriting perspective was Dee Dee Ramone, their bass player, who wrote some of their biggest hits. And in 1989, he decided to leave the band and become a rapper.
Whoa.
And he changed his name to D.D. King and somehow convinced a record label to let him record a full-length album of rap and hip-hop under the name D.D. King, and it's called Standing in the Spotlight from 1989, and I chose track number 1, which is a quasi-cover version of the 1960s song Mashed Potato Time. And
good Lord.
I can't even explain how absurd this is to you guys. This is something you're going to have to hear, and you're probably not going to be able to believe what you're listening to. For a guy that brought so much talent to the Ramones, it's almost like he lost all that talent when he decided to leave them.
Well, Craig, Michael Jordan played baseball for 16 months.
Oh, God.
So,
but I will say this. I think overall the album, Standing in the Spotlight, is an album I'll defend. I think there's actually songs on that album that the Ramones ended up recording as Ramones songs.
Wow.
And I actually think it's insight inside of who Dee Dee was as a person. And at the time he recorded this album, he was in recovery and unfortunately never really, sort of beat those demons. And his addiction got the better of him about 16 years ago. But if you listen to the lyrics of some of these songs, you can hear where his head is at, and it's pure. And I think that's the thing I respond to, is as silly as it is at points, and as juvenile as it is, and as simplistic as it is, if you break down the lyrics and what he's rapping about, it really gives you, like I said, insight into what was going inside that man's head internally, and the struggles that he had. And I think collectively it's a pretty moving piece of work. Even when you have songs where he's talking about meeting a mermaid, when he decides to go surfing. It's an absurd album, but I think it's also highly artistic. So please don't judge it based on Mashed Potato Time. But I'll tell you, much to my fiance's chagrin, we have the Google Home set up here, and you can ask for music on demand. And there's a lot of times where I'll just pause the TV and say, "Okay, Google, it's it just fired up. It's time for the Mashed Potato Time," and we'll listen to Dee Dee Ramone rap for 3 minutes. So that's my number 3 pick.
Nice. I'm fascinated with the transition from going from a rock and roll band to being a hip hop artist.
It's definitely a trip.
Did he do any autobiographies or anything, or he talks about what made him go in that direction?
Yeah, I haven't read his autobiography yet because I haven't been able to bring myself to read it, because every indication is it's like 80% fiction.
Oh.
But it's my understanding that he eventually acknowledged that he wasn't good at rapping and that it was probably not the best idea. But like I said, I think his intentions were pure. And yeah, I think initially he just really, and as absurd as this sounds, he felt like he shared some of the plight of, a lot of the artists that were in the hip hop community in the late 80s. So he kind of felt part of a movement that he really wasn't a part of.
Jamaal, any thoughts on Mashed Potato Time?
Oh man, I think I'm going to leave it there.
All right. So moving on, Craig, your 4th and final track.
All right. So looking at this list, I was trying to come up with a good number 4, something that would play well out of Mashed Potato Time, which is kind of a momentum stopper. But I looked at the tracks I had established already, and when I initially took the challenge, I was thinking about doing songs that were based on sweets. And Yummy, Yummy, Yummy kind of fit that bill. One Bad Apple is a food. Mashed potatoes a food. So I was trying to find a way to work another food in, and I couldn't really do that. But then I remembered this
no Meatloaf
band.
songs?
No, there's no guilty pleasures there for me. And I remembered this song from 1979, and I figured there was a little bit of a connection. It's from an album called Mouth to Mouth from the band Lips Inc.
Oh boy.
Funky Town. So I figured with the word lips in the title that it will work. And this also sort of ties into the whole fabrication thing. Dee Dee Ramone tried to be a rapper and he wasn't. And I think Lips Inc. it was just one dude that was trying to capitalize on disco and funk. And he created a novelty song called Funky Town. And I'm not sure I'm interested to hear your opinions on this song, but I consider it a guilty pleasure. But I think it succeeds in the sense that it's incredibly well made. It's well produced. I mean, when those strings come in, it just sounds good. And I think you could pretty much argue that all disco sounds good, and that's probably the cheat that is disco. Disco was completely manufactured. All the songs had the same, beats per minute. Everything was super isolated, so you got this great sounding stuff, and I fell for it with Funky Town.
Pretty amazing that you picked that, because I actually have that in my iTunes library. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
I don't consider it guilty anymore, though, because if you asked me maybe 10 years ago, I probably would have said, yeah, that's a guilty pleasure. But I think I've kind of come to a different space with disco now. I used to really despise disco, as did a lot of people I know, back in the 80s and 90s, and disco was a joke. But I've kind of really warmed up to disco in a weird way. It really, a lot of these songs really do sound good. You mentioned the strings in this arrangement, and they do a great job of layering all that stuff in and making it sound polished. The lyrics are pretty silly. There's really not much substance there, but it is kind of catchy. Jamaal, what do you think of Funky Town?
I think it's great. I love disco. I kind of grew up with that happening in my house, and disco had some of the great all-time arrangers in music history, with MFSB out of Philadelphia, and that whole sound. and bands like Chic with Nile Rodgers
Mm-hmm.
and Bernard Edwards, and they had a trademark sound just from Chic, but you can tell which song Chic produced because those guys were so good that all
Yeah.
those hits they wrote for Sister Sledge and for Diana Ross and everybody else. So I love disco. I always thought disco was layered, but especially when the bands from Philadelphia came in and they would throw the strings on top of the driving beat and everything. It was just magnificent. So I mean, I would to me this song wouldn't be guilty of me. I'd be proud to bump that. And that's a good song. That's a song that keeps the party going too.
Oh hell yeah!
and in any decade, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but your point earlier, Craig, about some songs may be guilty for you, but not for other people. That's a great point because any of the songs that we pick are going to fall into that. And obviously, the Funky Town's got a lot of love from Jamaal and I, so I don't think either one of us considers it guilty. But I think it's cool that you do.
Well, I mean, do you think there's any other than the immediate family of the dude that was Lip Sync? Do you think there's any Lip Sync fans out there? Are devoted fans that cherish their records? I mean,
it's a good question.
That's a tough one. Yeah.
I don't think I know any other Lip Sync.
For every band out there, there's a number one fan, right?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. By the process of elimination, you could find the number one Lip Sync fan. Magic of the internet. Let's get to work on it, guys.
Yeah, that's my list, and I actually think when you listen to it in sequence, I think it's a pretty enjoyable listen.
Yeah, I definitely. We're going to put this list together. Everybody's list is going to be put into one playlist on Apple Music and Spotify, and we'll have the links at the end of the show and in the show notes for you, so you can go and listen to some of these songs. But Craig, any final thoughts on your mix?
It was a lot of fun to try and come up with a concept and then a track listing that worked, and this ended up being like I said at the beginning, a little bit more challenging than I thought. So I'm glad I accepted the challenge, and like I said, I think it's a nice mix, and hopefully people find something to love in it.
Yeah, well, I'm spinning up mashed potato time as soon as we're done recording this because that sounds phenomenal to me.
That's fantastic.
So, Jamaal Green, you are going to be next up here on the Mixtape Challenge. Give us the title of your mix and a little bit of a breakdown of how you pick the stuff and the order that you put it in.
Cool. So, the title of my mix is called Audio Dessert. And it's called Audio Dessert because dessert comes in many different flavors and many different things people consider dessert. And dessert is the one time when you can indulge with no judgments.
Nice.
And so I figured that's what I would call this.
Love it.
And this was harder than I thought. I mean, it took a while to edit this list down. I realized just how wide-ranging my taste in music was, but it just was kind of random. But so if there's ever a part 2 to this show, I would love to do it again because there's some stuff I left off.
Oh, for sure.
But, I guess the way I approach this list is okay. For people who know me, would they think I would listen to this? And also, is this something that I would blast in my car by myself and sing along to, or would it be something I would play with other people in the car? So, and I said, okay, what are the things I would mainly only just blast driving down the highway by myself and sing to? And that's how I chose.
Nice, very good. Any particular thoughts to the order of the songs, or just however they fell?
They kind of fell in somewhat of an order. I arranged them basically, all of them had to do with some sort of facet of attraction and love. And, in different stages, the want stage, the now stage, the dissolving stage, and then the longing for what you had stage kind of deal. So
interesting, a concept mix.
Yeah, it's kind of there, but, as best I could. But so that's how I had it staged out.
All right, Miss Well, are you ready to tell us track 1 of Audio Dessert?
I absolutely am. And track 1 is Do You Really Want to Hurt Me by Culture Club.
Oh! 80s gem.
Yes. And it's from the album Kissing to Be Clever, and it's track 9. And it came out in 1982. And you can find it on iTunes or Amazon or wherever you get your music from. And I absolutely love the song and will never grow tired of the song. I think it's probably my favorite Culture Club song. And this song dropped in '82, and which was cool about this was the band's first hit in the United States. This is how they were introduced. They had a couple singles already out in the UK, but this is how they dropped in the States. And it was released in November of '82. And I remember watching this video for this song probably a year later on a show called Hot Tracks. I don't know if you guys remember Hot Tracks.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, when Hot Tracks would come on, and it was just so out there. And this had the benefit of being the time period where videos were just starting to drop. And one thing about Boy George is he knew the power of a music video way before a lot of his contemporaries, and how image could be everything. So their videos were very, very decadent and very layered, especially this video. And Boy George is a bold dude. He didn't care. He was who he was. That video hit with this song, which was a magnificent song, and that Boy George actually could sing. And on top of that, he's a great writer, and just he's a great, perfectly put together package. What I like about this song is the song is about heartache. It's about somebody who's really aching. Being a huge reggae fan that I am, I love the rhythm section of this band, which John Moss and Mikey Craig on bass. Mikey Craig was actually a British Jamaican guy, and he was also a DJ and stuff, but he just killed the bass line in this song. When this song comes on, the bass line hits and it starts thundering. It's just fantastic. Another cool thing about this song, it was released. The B-side was a dub version, and dub was huge. Dub was an instrumental reggae song, and that was really smart of them doing that, releasing the B-side as a dub version, because it got huge play in the clubs because of that. And It could play the regular song, and then the dub song would go on for 9 minutes. And nobody would leave the dance floor. Following this, Culture Club had a bunch of hits, but this was my number one song.
Great pick. This song's got a great groove. This is also in my iTunes library. I love this track.
I never get sick of it.
Nah, Craig Cohen, thoughts?
Great song, and beautiful vocal. I think you pointed out a lot of great things about this song, but I think Boy George as a vocalist, especially on this song, you can hear that heartache.
Absolutely.
You can hear the emotion behind it. And I think that this era was also I often think about, when people grew up, and we all kind of grew up around the same time. And I mean, this was a great time to be growing up because, like you said, Jamaal, MTV was just blowing up, and bands had experimented with the visual side of things for years, but MTV sort of blew that up and allowed artists to explore even more. And you saw the great videos that came out of that, and artists that really embraced it, like Culture Club, or an artist like David Bowie or Duran Duran. I think it's a really important time for music. And one other thing that I found interesting, and this is something that I've talked about with some of my friends, and I don't want to get too political on this because this is just a fun musical show, but it seems wild to me that at some point between the 80s and today, society sort of became more judgmental because you had a character like Boy George that, from every memory I have, was pretty accepted. He was mainstream. He was commercial. You had characters on TV shows like Meshach Taylor on Designing Women. You had very, flamboyant, out there gay characters, and you had a lot of stereotypes being represented in film and TV. You had the Cosby Show. You had, a lot of Latinos. And then I think at some point we turned a corner, and then all of a sudden it's great to see now that people are talking about diversity again, and you have stuff like Black Panther really, exploding. But I haven't been able to figure out when we turn that corner, and I'm not sure that's a discussion for this episode. But I also think that that's one of the great things about this era as well, is you could have somebody like Boy George who could just be Boy George, or Prince, who could be as flamboyant as he was.
Absolutely.
But still be accepted as an artist.
Yeah, I have a little bit of a different memory of of Boy George. Because of the area that I grew up in a relatively conservative part of New Jersey, and I remember there being, I don't want to say controversy necessarily, but there was some consternation by, older parents of us, and the image that Boy George was portraying was problematic in their eyes. Although, I mean, all of us loved him, but I remember some parents having some issues.
Yeah, I remember a few parents of friends who had that, but I think a lot of it was people were afraid to talk about it back then.
Mm-hmm, yes.
I think that's what it was. I think they had some ideas, and I thought there was actually people ignorant enough to think that they would never, that, oh, he's just flamboyant, or he's just an entertainer, and they do that, but he's not really that. And Boy George put on no airs at all.
Yep.
He was comfortable who he was, and he said, this is who I am, and he came out and he made great music, and because he was so comfortable in who he was, I don't think it was a problem. Like Craig said, I mean, we can go on for forever about it, but I just thought, the guy was a brilliant artist. The song was just amazing for me. So
agreed.
But I feel everything both you guys are saying.
All ready to move on to track 2, Mr. Green?
I am.
All right.
Track 2 is going to switch gears a little bit. Instead of hurting to the kind of the pursuing type of thing. And track 2 is "Girl You Know It's True" by Milli Vanilli.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And that is track number 11 off the album All or Nothing, 1988. And this is kind of funny because, of course, we know Milli Vanilli is not really the guys who sang on it, but they're part of the package because, the writers are credited as Kai Adeyemo, Rodney Holloway, Kevin Liles, Bill Petaway Jr., and Sean Spencer. When you look at the actual singers behind this, Brad Howell and John Davies, and Jody Rocco and Linda Rocco, I get why they said, okay, we'd never be able to sell this song with this group. Frank Farian was a notoriously shiesty producer over in Europe, and he said, I got this great sound. I need this cutting edge image. He basically got these guys, Fab Morvan and Rob Pilatus, who barely had a command of the English language, but what are you going to do? He came to these guys beforehand. This is their interpretation, is that they already had the song pre-recorded and played it for them. So I need you guys to be the face of this, and gave them a small advance and signed them some money, and got them a bunch of clothes and marketed them and everything around, and told them if you ever let it out, that you have to prepay the entire advance in full. So those guys were, like, they were street dancers. They're like, okay, we're just gonna ride this until we can. But if you look at the people who actually sang this song, they look like a gospel group.
Yeah.
So I kind of get it. But even though the reason there's a controversy and the underlying thing, the only reason there would be no controversy if this song sucked. But the song was fucking awesome. Excuse my language.
Beep.
Sorry about that. This is a great song. The beat is ridiculous. It's an ultimate party starter. I don't know how many kids were doing that rope stomping dance that Milli Vanilli was known for doing. And, it's a great song that even if you can't dance, you have no rhythm. For some reason, when you're dancing to this song, it looks like you do. But this song can come on while I'm cruising somewhere, and the beat knocks. It's a well-produced song. And it came in at a good era. The song was released in '88, and that's around the time when a subgenre of R&B called New Jack Swing was coming into fruition. And it was led by guys like Teddy Riley and such. And New Jack Swing was mixing hip hop with classic R&B. And this song was also had a lot of the elements that was going on the R&B sound in London, which bands like Soul to Soul and Terrence Trent D'Arby and those guys. But it's an absolutely well put together song, well packaged image with these two, good looking dudes with the long hair and I don't know what kind of pants you would call them. They're like yoga capris.
Yeah.
And like these oversized jackets and they had a package, they had a formula, and it worked.
Certainly did.
The song was great.
Craig Cohen, thoughts on Milli Vanilli?
As crazy as this sounds, Jamaal, I was trying my best to find a way to work Milli Vanilli into my list because of the whole sort of fabricated angle, and they were sort of fabricated after the fact in the public's eyes. But great choice. And at the time, I couldn't appreciate Milli Vanilli because of my own musical bias and the fact that I felt a loyalty to certain types of music and couldn't appreciate music outside of those genres. But yeah, there's no denying the talent behind those songs. And, you know, when that whole house of cards fell down, it kind of tarnished the music for a while. And it's cool to see that on your list because I think that that's probably some music that deserves to be reevaluated.
Yeah, I think I could say I suffered from the same affliction that Craig did, and you know, especially back in those times. And I've talked about it a little earlier on another mixtape episode, but I was pretty blind to genres that were outside of the ones I was loyal to during this era. So I don't think I could have appreciated Milli Vanilli at the time. So, but I have to agree, it is damn catchy and it is damn danceable. I remember watching a behind the music thing on these guys, and just I was fascinated by when the whole thing went down, and was it a CD skipped during a live performance or something?
It was an MTV concert. I forgot what it was called. It was in Connecticut, and it skipped. You know what the funny part is? It was downtown. Julie Brown said she was at the concert when the music skipped and those guys ran off stage. They ended up coming back a few minutes later and finishing the show. And she said at the time at the concert, nobody cared.
Yeah.
they didn't flinch. There was no controversy.
Yeah. I've always felt like that was a sound guy that one of them pissed off with a diva attitude because stuff just doesn't skip like that. Yeah. And I remember that behind the music, Jeff. I remember one of the guys in the band said they would rehearse, and the two Rob and Fab wouldn't be there for the rehearsals. And he said, "Wow, these guys must be so good that they don't even need to rehearse." Yeah, and of course we knew they didn't need to rehearse because they didn't need to sing.
Exactly.
But you know, it's funny because lip syncing is so commonplace.
Exactly.
You know, I bet you they could have gotten away with it if they played it a little bit better.
Exactly. And those guys were they were fish out of water. They really, it wasn't their idea. They were on the streets in Germany, and some dude came up to them and said, "Hey, I got this thing. You want to do it?" And then they were fish out of water. And the stardom went to the guys. Hey, drugs came in, and I think Rob Pilatus I think he passed away, so I don't want to talk about the guy too much. But I think they said he was telling people that he was better. He was better than Elvis. He's the next Elvis, and better than Bob Dylan and stuff. So so I think your theory may ring true, Craig, about the pissed off sound guy. So.
Yeah, but you know what else is interesting, Jamaal, too, is during that era and even before it, you had people like CNC Music Factory that were using attractive women in their videos that weren't the voice on the record.
Oh, yeah.
And even if and so I mean, it was almost I don't want to say commonplace, but it was almost a standard practice for certain kind of music. I mean, look at like I said, CNC Music Factory is a perfect example. And I think the girl on the record actually ended up suing because she saw the video and she was like, "Hold on a minute."
Yep. Yeah, man. Honestly, if they would have played it a little cooler, they probably could have just gotten away with that at least a little longer.
But all right, you ready to move on to track number 3, Jamaal?
Yeah, track number 3. Track number 3 is a guilty pleasure, but it's not so guilty because I think it's well crafted. Number 3, it's "Live to Tell" by Madonna. It's off the True Blue album. It's track number 4 in 1986, and it is a beautifully composed song that's really was a change. This is Madonna coming off her Like a Virgin tour, and she wanted to be accepted as more than just a controversial figure, and she tried to clean up her image just briefly with this, and be known as a balladeer as well. And this song the lyrics were really well written, and they were much deeper than anything she had written at that time. It's all subjective, but it's my opinion. And if you remember, Madonna was kind of dressed up as Marilyn Monroe in this video, and it was a slower song, and the song was written for the Sean Penn movie At Close Range.
I knew it was for a movie. Yeah.
And here's the funny thing is that the song was originally an instrumental. It was composed by a guy named Patrick Leonard, and it was supposed to be the score for a film called Fire with Fire, but the director and the producer heard that and didn't think this guy could really score movies, and somehow Madonna heard the instrumental, and she took it and she wrote all the lyrics to it and wrote some of the melodies, and then sang it for the composer Patrick Leonard. And when he composed it, he originally envisioned a man singing it. So if you listen to the lyrics, it's from a man's point of view. And there's different interpretations of the lyrics for that song. It's about lost love, but some people also think it means there's some child abuse. Somebody suffering from child abuse, getting older. So, but it's really, 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 really well composed and crafted. I love the lyrics. It fit well with the film as well. It's just one of those songs that every time it comes on, it gets me.
Craig, familiar with this one?
Oh yeah, and Jamaal, man, you're hitting all the feels today, man, because that's another emotional tune with, I don't think Madonna's really considered a great singer by any means, but this is another emotional vocal where she sells the hell out of the feeling behind the song. Great choice, man. I'm digging your list.
Oh, appreciate it, man.
It's an interesting step down from Milli Vanilli, though. You had a big mood change there.
Cool. I'm glad you guys dig it, man.
Yeah, it's good stuff. So I'm ready for the wrap up here. What's track 4?
Track 4. This is the monumental track "Down Low" by R. Kelly.
Oh.
And R. Kelly. There's a lot to unpack with R. Kelly. R. Kelly is probably one of the most brilliant producers that's ever been in music, and arrangers and writers. And the guy sold over 40 million records, but he's not without his warts. But it's a guilty pleasure because it's R. Kelly. If you've ever listened to any of R. Kelly's music, there's no suggestion in it at all. You know exactly what he's getting at. He's talking about. Down Low was from the album R. Kelly, and this was the follow-up to his debut album, 12 Play. But the music is so damn beautiful on the song, and it's a guilty pleasure. R. Kelly is a hell of a storyteller, and one of the things with music with me as a filmmaker is I listen to certain songs, and I listen to music when I write, number one, but music kind of designs scenes for me in my head, and I can craft off that. But with R. Kelly is such a great songwriter. All his songs seem like a movie scene, and which is why he's got a billion of those Trapped in the Closet videos he's had. I don't know if you've seen Jeff, but Craig, you're familiar with the Trapped in the Closet series, right?
Oh, heck yeah.
Yes.
It's got a midget in it too, man. I remember when that midget popped out of the kitchen cabinet, man. It was just like mind blowing.
There's some doozies. There's some doozies. Now, R. Kelly is an extremely, extremely passionate dude, and his composition skills have been compared to, by people in the business, have been compared to Prince, and ever in Berlin, and he's written so many songs, and they're so good, but he has a tendency to just stick with one topic. And I mean, and I don't want to railroad the guy completely, because I mean, he does write songs about other things, but his songs are extremely, extremely sexual in nature, which is not a problem either, because that's what Marvin Gaye was like. But Marvin Gaye used a little more tact when he did it, and that's kind of the difference. But Down Low also includes some of the vocals of Ron Isley, and I love the Isley brothers. And and that was a great, R. Kelly is good. That was a great mashup of them. And it tells a great story. And Ron Isley, because of this team with R. Kelly went on to produce, I think, 2 or 3 albums for the Isley Brothers and R. Kelly after this, and kind of reinvigorated their career. And their sounds mesh beautifully. This song just sounds just amazing, like most of R. Kelly's stuff. The way it was packaged is, it was the music video was directed by Hype Williams, who at that time, Hype Williams was directing every major rap video out there. So was fisheye lenses, huge sets. If you remember all the Missy Elliott videos and the Busta Rhymes videos, that was all Hype Williams, that whole style. And he directed this video, and it was loosely based off a noir classic film from 1946 called Gilda. But with R. Kelly, he throws his passion into it. And R. Kelly, again, he's not without his warts, but the guys, just give you a little background on R. Kelly. R. Kelly life. R. Kelly grew up in the projects in Chicago. I think it's the Brownsville neighborhood, and just Chicago and projects. That's all you need to know. But he had a really tough upbringing where I think his best friend was a girl from his neighborhood, and I think she was 10 years old, and he watched her drown, and he just had a tragedy after tragedy. He was abused by one of his babysitters. I think when he was 11, got shot before he was a teenager. Got shot riding his bike home. So all that stuff that's happened to him, you kind of hear it in some of his music, and he puts it there. But then there's the dark side of R. Kelly, which makes this a guilty pleasure because they kind of don't want to support all that, what he did. But if I'm just judging from the music, this song is on my list.
Yeah, tangential reference. The name R. Kelly always takes me back to Chappelle's show, man.
That's it, yes.
Always takes me back. Drip, drip, drip. Always takes me back. Craig, any thoughts on R. Kelly?
Yeah, I really dig that choice, Jamaal. And I had forgotten what a great artist R. Kelly was. And I remember after she died, I discovered an appreciation for Aaliyah's music.
Yeah. And
went back and found her first album, Age Ain't Nothing But a Number, which R. Kelly pretty much, that's an R. Kelly album with Aaliyah singing. I was like, wow, R. Kelly's got some talent. And it's easy to get lost in the stuff you see in the headlines.
Right.
So and a lot of times it is hard to separate the art from the artist, but really cool, man. I think you have a solid list, and I definitely wouldn't be ashamed to listen to it.
Nice. Final thoughts on your mix, Jamaal?
I think these are the ones that spoke to me up front, and I hope they're listenable to you, and they're enjoyable. But this is my guilty pleasure.
Nice.
This is my audio dessert, man.
Very cool. So audio dessert will be available in our master playlists for this show after the show airs. So you'll be able to hear all of these songs. If you're familiar or not, you'll be able to check them all out. So I guess that just leaves me and my mix. So I guess I'll jump right into mine. The title of mine actually came to me after I finally boiled down to 4 tracks. I had quite a few. When I finally boiled them down, I realized there was one common thread between all 4 of them. They're all from the 80s. I don't know how that happened. It just worked out that way. So the title of my mix is Reconciling with the 80s. So I must have some kind of latent 80s musical guilt going on. It was totally unintentional for it to wind up this way. I mean, I had so many candidates. I've got plenty to do another Guilty Pleasures, Jamaal. So don't worry. I'm sure we'll do another one down the road. But as far as the order of these tracks, they're all relatively different stylistically. So there really isn't a great order to put them in. I arranged them as best I could. So it starts off kind of on a mellow tip. Then it goes kind of freaky. Then it gets into I don't want to give away too much, and then there's a really big ending, which I think will give Mr. Craig Cohen a big smile. So we have a little bit of a connection on this one. So there's definitely a couple on here that I think are potentially embarrassing, but I think that's the fun part of this challenge. It was definitely fun looking back on all these. There's some nostalgia that works into every one of these picks as well, I think. All right, I guess I'll just jump on in. So, oh man. My first track is from 1986, and it is from the self-titled album Christopher Cross, It is track 8. Oh, Jamaal might already know what this is. It's a song called Sailing.
Sailing, yes.
Yeah.
That's a great song, man.
When I hear this song, I am instantly transported back into the passenger seat of my mom's Chevy Chevette back in the 80s. And
oh, wow.
Man, I think this song is, in my mind, is the epitome of 80s adult contemporary soft rock.
It is, man.
It's not pure nostalgia, though, for me. There is some nostalgic bit to this, like I just said, but it's not pure nostalgia. I remember I absolutely hated this song as a kid. I mean, I can't really pinpoint. I'm trying to think back on when I turned on it and when it became a guilty pleasure, but I can't really nailed down a time when I stopped hating it and realized that I actually really liked it. It's just so supremely mellow, and it's got some beautiful string accompaniment in the arrangement, and I'm a sucker for piano solos. So I was totally sold when I started to warm up to this. And Christopher Cross's voice has really grown on me a lot over the years. I think when I was a kid, I thought he sounded a little too nasal for me, but I really started to dig it and appreciate it more. And, you know, another reason I think that I started to like this song was maybe I think I understand the lyrics a little bit better now that I'm older. I mean, it's really about appreciating art and being able to travel to places, you know, in your mind through looking at a painting. You know, the lyric, the canvas can do miracles.
That's it.
It's an interesting thought. And although I've never been a fan of sailing, I'm not great on boats, it can really be a metaphor, you know, for any kind of escapism that you can get lost in. I think, you know, the bigger picture, you know, this song is a good example of how my musical tastes have evolved. I mean, we made a reference to this. Craig made a reference to this too, that, you know, we're a little bit younger and we were kind of stuck in certain genres that we were really loyal to, and we didn't give anything else a chance, more or less. But, you know, as I got older, you know, I think all of us are working adults at this point, and, you know, we also have some labor-intensive hobbies, and sometimes we just need to chill out, man, with some good mellow tunes, and this one really fits the bill for me. So, any of you guys have any thoughts? I know Jamaal had some thoughts on sailing.
That's a great choice, man. And it's one of those songs when you're young, we just don't have enough life experience to appreciate it.
Yeah.
What's going on there. I know exactly what you're talking about as that being the epitome of those light FM, soft rock, AM gold stations of the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
That riding along in the backseat of my parents' car, and especially my mom. And you'd hear this and Air Supply and other.
Oh yeah! Oh my God! REO
Speedwagon.
Speedwagon.
Yeah. So, but this is a great song. It's a great choice. Just another song that shows you how great writing translates. This song was redone a few years ago by an R&B group called Avant, and it's just as beautiful. And it was a great redo of the song.
Nice. I'm gonna have to look that one up. Very cool. I'll try to get a link to that one in the show notes. Craig, any thoughts on Christopher Cross or sailing?
Yeah. This reminds me that I need to suggest to you that we do a challenge episode on yacht rock.
Yacht rock, nice.
But yeah, I mean, Christopher Cross, I remember this is a song too that, you know, as a kid used to hear this on the radio all the time, and also the song he did for Arthur.
Yes,
Arthur,
yes.
And yeah, I mean, this is I think a song that you might not be able to appreciate as a youngster. But, you know, it's weird. Christopher Cross is one of those artists, man. He was one of those artists that I believe he won Best New Artist at the Grammys, and then you never really heard from him again. And it seems to be a curse with the Grammys and the Best New Artist.
Yeah, he's still out there. He's still out there touring and making records, man. If you listen to this, Chris, you know, hope to hear another big one from you soon.
He was one of those dudes that when you're a kid, everybody looks 40. And he was probably in his mid-20s then.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's just funny that, you know, he looked like we are now, but it's just funny, man, how your perception is when you're a kid.
It's true. Although we could do a whole show on how much older people looked when we were younger. That's a great topic.
Les Nessman from WKRP. That dude was like 38 when that show debuted.
I thought he was in his 50s.
Oh my God, yeah. I thought he was as old. I was like, that's 38?
And looking at my mom's early 70s high school yearbook, I thought all the kids in that when her senior class were in their 20s, maybe even their 30s.
Oh yeah, man.
It's a major facial hair back then. But all right, thanks guys. Well, I'll move on to my track 2. Track 2 is stylistically very different than track 1. So this is kind of much more upbeat and danceable. This is from 1985. My introduction to this song was actually in a 1986 film called Back to School, starring Mr. Rodney Dangerfield. This is Oingo Boingo's Dead Man's Party. This is track number 2 on their album Dead Man's Party, and this is a really wacky song. In the movie, it's played like in a quasi-live. It's the studio version, but it's a quasi-live in a party scene with a big neon Oingo Boingo on the wall in the background. At the time, I was not really familiar with the band at all, so the name really threw me. I was like, is this a real band? you know, the arrangement is so quirky. There's like horns and synthesizers going off everywhere. It's got a pretty driving beat. And by today's standards, it does sound like an 80s song. I mean, if you listen to this, there's no question that this came out in the 80s, and it pretty much screams it in your face. Super danceable song, and it's about exactly what the title would imply. You know, lyrics like "It's a dead man's party, who could ask for more? Everybody's coming, leave your body at the door." Super campy and silly, but there's something really catchy about this tune. And of course, you know, Danny Elfman was part of this band, who's gone on to score lots of incredible films. You know, Batman, namely. Fantastic stuff. A lot of Tim Burton films, and he's done a lot of great work. So a lot of real talent in this group. And what I didn't know about this until recently, when I started to do some research on this is part of a loose new wave pop concept album that they did about death. So Dead Man's Party is actually kind of a loose concept album. It's by the way, cool side note about the album too. I didn't realize this until I looked into it, but the song Weird Science is also on the same album. So two songs used in iconic 80s movies on the same record. That's pretty good. It's a pretty good record.
Wow.
That's right.
Any thoughts on Oingo Boingo, Craig?
Yeah, it's funny. I've actually, this song has been on my radar within the last month for two different reasons. The first is it was on TV on one of the channels when I was surfing one night, and I actually stopped on that party scene and watched the whole performance. And about a week prior to that, I had heard Don Was from Was Not Was on a podcast, and in my head I thought that Dead Man's Party was a Was Not Was song until I realized that was Walk the Dinosaur, which led me to look up who did Dead Man's Party. And then, like I said, a week later, I saw Back to School. So, yeah, I think 80s New Wave is another really sort of just interesting time in music. And I think there's probably a lot of really good stuff to be mined from that, you know. And yeah. And, it's funny. You just mentioned Weird Science. And until you just said it, I probably always assumed that was like a Thomas Dolby song.
Yeah, it definitely has that vibe.
Yeah.
Jamaal, any thoughts on the Boingo?
Yeah, actually, when I first heard that song, I thought it was Flock of Seagulls. That, and I remember this song from Back to School, and it was, like Craig said, there's a lot of good stuff to be mined from this, but it's also during an era where just the movies had such killer soundtracks. Man.
Oh, goodness.
And we could have 5 separate shows on just that, on 80 soundtracks. And there was just so much. The soundtracks were just really well done. But yeah, this is a great one. And actually, Craig, Jeff, it does sound 80s, but there's a lot of music that's coming back to the sound right now.
It's true. That's true. I've been listening to a lot of indie music that's been recommended to me by Apple Music, and since I have some of this stuff in my library, it's been recommending newer music that has a similar sound. And I've discovered a couple of new artists that have just been coming out that have a very retro 80s synth sound. So pretty cool stuff out there. So I like how everything seems to come back around in the musical space. We'll see where that goes, but. All right, I guess I'll move on to track number 3. And this, I think, may, by today's standards, be seen as almost a novelty song. But I feel that my connection with this song when it came out, because it was one of those songs, gimmicky and silly, but somehow endearing. This is 1988. This is the 7th track on the DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince album. He's the DJ. I'm the rapper. It's Parents Just Don't Understand. I knew that would get a laugh from somebody. But, man, I remember the craze over Parents Just Don't Understand when this song came out. And I remember buying the cassette version of He's the DJ, I'm the Rapper. And the tape was so long. 17 songs.
Mm-hmm.
And none of them are super short either. I mean, you got your value for your money from this record, and this song is like kind of a time capsule for me. I think I was around 14 or so when it came out, and it takes me back to a time when the things this song talks about were big deals in my life, right? Kids in school laughing at your clothes, being too young to drive, but wanting the freedom, and maybe doing something like, taking your parents' car out or something, getting punished for dumb things. And, just the frustration of your parents not understanding what it was like to be a kid anymore, So I think they kind of captured, the minds of the youth and a certain mindset with this track. And I don't know, this is also around the time where there were so many cool hip hop mashup songs coming out too, like the Fat Boys Wipe Out and Run DMC and Aerosmith's Walk This Way. And even on this record, there's a Nightmare on Elm Street themed mashup song called Nightmare on My Street that almost was on this list in place of this song.
Yeah, which also involves some litigation.
It does.
Yes.
It does. I mean, the guy that does the Freddy voice in that song is pretty good.
Yeah.
It's pretty good, but...
that also had Mike Tyson on it too, right?
That was I think I Could Be Mike Tyson was the album before that. Yeah, was it one after?
He's one before, one after, but yeah.
Yeah, that was a good song though. I like that one. I could have put that one on my list too. Jamaal, any thoughts on Parents Just Don't Understand?
Of course, that's an eternal classic for anybody just a fan of hip hop in general, from any subgenre of hip hop, especially during that time when I was privileged enough to be growing up in New York when hip hop was just coming up and it was a local thing, and I saw it happening all around me. And that was during a time when you couldn't really hear hip hop on the radio except for Friday or Saturday night, depending on whatever urban station you listen to. So this is one of the songs that helped break it into the everyday rotation of any radio station. This is also a defining album and a song and album in two different ways. In that, one, it was starting to open up the Philadelphia hip hop scene. At that point in time, the center of hip hop was still just New York, and Jazzy Jeff was doing amazing things over in Philadelphia, and this album, showcased a lot of his cutting and scratching skills as well.
It certainly did.
He's a beast. He still is. He's still out there doing it too, and killing it. But I think this is a great choice.
Thanks, Craig. Any thoughts on DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince?
Yeah, I remember that this was when I was a kid. We talked earlier about being able to accept music or keeping your mind closed to music because of certain allegiances you felt. And DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince fell into that category where it didn't matter who you were, at least in my perspective. If you were a hard rock and heavy metal guy, you could still appreciate what they were doing because it came from such a pure place. But also, I think comedy music tends to be appreciated more too because it's designed to make you laugh, which is I think what DJ Jazzy Jeff and Fresh Prince were trying to do. And I'm also amazed that I lived through this and that there were more than 2 albums that those dudes made, because I would assume they made their first album and then the one that had Summertime on it. So it's blowing my mind that they had like multiple albums.
Yeah, actually they did. And, just talking about the album itself, as I said before, it's really long. So many tracks. And, the album is really good. I mean, if you listen to it from beginning to end, there's a lot of really great stuff on there. Time to Chill is great. Brand New Funk is great. Charlie Mack, the song about their bodyguard that gets out of the limo for them. I mean, there's so many great tracks on this album. And they're all really fun. They're mostly lighthearted. And, I really dug this when I was a kid, and I was glad that I convinced myself to buy that tape after hearing the song, and it really exposed me to, this was really my introduction to hip hop. It's kind of led me down some other roads that we'll probably get into on another mixtape challenge episode sometime in the future. But so I guess it's time to close this one up. And this final track, my track 4, is my Craig Cohen connection. Craig and I, aside from talking about Star Trek on another podcast, we also do a show about Sylvester Stallone's movie career called Slycast. And this song just happens to be used in a Sylvester Stallone movie that I'm very partial to. And, all right, I'm just going to throw it out there, man. This was 1987 by pretty much the undisputed king of 80s movie songs, Kenny Loggins.
Oh man.
This is from the film Over the Top. It is Meet Me Halfway.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Also from Kenny Loggins' own album in 1988, Back to Avalon, where it was track 11. So I saved the song for last, and one of the reasons I did that, because if you listen to a previous mixtape challenge, I think it was the last one, I threw out a dig at Kenny Loggins on that. And I know I've thrown out digs at Kenny Loggins as jokes on other shows I've been on. So, I wanted to fall on my own sword here and actually say there is some Kenny Loggins music that I actually do like. So I think it was kind of fitting to throw this in here. But I also don't think this song would have been on my list if it wasn't for the movie that it was featured in. So like I said, the 87 Stallone film Over the Top was one of those movies that came out at just the right time for me in my age. And although I will admit that it's not the greatest movie ever, we can debate that. And I think we did on Slycast. I think that was episode 9, I believe, of Slycast. If you want to hear Craig and I and some of our other Stallone-loving friends talk about this movie. But basically, it's the story of a kid, is growing up without a father, essentially, and is unexpectedly forced to rebuild a relationship, being stuck with him. And I think that kind of stuck with me. For my childhood doesn't exactly line up with that situation, but in the film, but there's enough there to make it relatable to me as a kid. So this song brings back a lot of that, the connection I had with that film, and it was kind of special to me back then as a kid. So, what can you say about this song? It's pretty epic. Kenny Loggins' vocals on this are pretty incredible. I mean, the lyrics are just pretty triumphant and celebratory, and it's probably a good homecoming dance song. Jamaal, any thoughts on Meet Me Halfway?
It's a fantastic song. It's epic. They don't make epic songs like that anymore, especially not in movies. It comes from a great bad movie. It's a fantastically bad movie with a fantastic soundtrack. I think isn't like Sammy Hagar and some of those guys on the soundtrack?
Yeah.
Well? Yeah, that's a
Winner
great
Takes
soundtrack.
It All.
Winner Takes It All, yeah.
And Over the Top, but yeah, that was a Kenny Loggins is an 80s movies soundtrack royalty. If there's like a Hall of Fame or a Heaven's Gate for those guys.
Heaven's Gate.
Kenny Loggins is his first member, man.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, you had what? Caddyshack, Footloose, Top Gun.
Yep.
Goodness, man.
Yeah, he was just a beast.
He was.
Yeah.
I'm sure we're forgetting some.
Did he make anything for Transformers, the movie?
I don't
80s one?
believe so, no.
Okay. But yeah, he had he was just everywhere. So, I think the Kenny Loggins, school for motion picture soundtracks should be the thing.
Hell yeah.
And did Stallone use that song? Because there's a line in the movie where he tells his son that nobody meets you halfway. So,
yes.
Yeah. I always love when they're able to incorporate stuff like that.
Yeah. Good memory.
Great closing track, Jeff, and nice way to tie in the Slycast.
Oh, thanks, man. When I realized that I'd taken one too many digs at Kenny Loggins over my podcasting years, I said, this sounds like a really good track, and I know since you were going to be on here, I thought it'd be a great tie-in with the Slycast. So
nice.
All right. So thanks, guys, for putting these mixes together. So in closing, before we end the show, why don't we go around the table and just give a quick recap of our mixes, just track, title, artist, and album. Jamaal, go ahead and give us a recap of your mix.
All right. My mix is Audio Dessert, and my first track is Do You Really Want to Hurt Me by The Culture Club. And that's from the album Kissing to Be Clever, track 9. All right. Following that up is Milli Vanilli, Girl You Know It's True. And that is from the All or Nothing album, track 11. Third, I have Live to Tell by Madonna. And that is off the album True Blue. And that's track number 4. And closing out, I have Down Low by R. Kelly, off the album R. Kelly, and that's track 8.
Nice. Craig Cohen, recap of your mix.
All right, yeah. So we've got the Listen Like Nobody's Watching mix, and it starts with the Ohio Express, Yummy, Yummy, Yummy from 1968, followed by the Osmonds doing their best Jackson 5 on One Bad Apple from 1970. And then it's the Mashed Potato Time with D.D. King from 1989, Standing in the Spotlight. And we finish things off with Funky Town by Lips Inc. from 1979.
Excellent, excellent. Now, my mix once again is Reconciling with the 80s. Track 1, Sailing by Christopher Cross. It's track 8 from his self-titled album Christopher Cross. Came out in 1986. Track 2, Dead Man's Party by Oingo Boingo. Track number 2 on the album Dead Man's Party in 1985. Track number 3, Parents Just Don't Understand by DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince on the album He's the DJ, I'm the Rapper. It's track number 7. That's 1988. And finally, track number 4, Meet Me Halfway by Kenny Loggins. You can find it in 2 places. The Over the Top soundtrack, it is track number 6. And on Kenny's album Back to Avalon, it is track number 11. All right, and that brings us to the end of Mixtape Challenge episode number 3. I think we have all met the Pleading the Fifth Guilty Pleasures Challenge very well. We all rose to the occasion. So thank you guys, and let's jump around again and tell everybody where they can find us and our projects on the internet and social media. Jamaal Green, where can people find you?
You can find me on Facebook or Twitter and Instagram at Jamaal R. Green, and my project's Chronicles of. It's available. You can find it on Vimeo at Chronicles of a Profiler, and you can find it on Facebook at Chronicles of. And my film project, Manny Congo, that I'm working on with my partner, Wilson Biavenga, who is the writer and creator of it. You can find that on Facebook at Manny Congo.
Very cool. Mr. Craig Cohen, where can people find you?
You can pretty much find me and links to all the things that I contribute to over on Twitter at Mr. Craig Cohen. I'll always send out links to podcast appearances that I'm on, new dates for my my Ramones project. So yeah, anything I'm involved with, I'll link to it on that Twitter, Mr. Craig Cohen.
Very cool, very cool. And you can find out more about the show at mixtapechallenge.com. And you can follow the show. We have the same handle on Apple Music, Spotify, and Twitter. It's at 4Song Mixtape on all 3 services. And we'll be tweeting out our episodes. And you can find all of our playlists for all of our episodes on Apple Music and Spotify. And there's links to them on our website in our show notes for these episodes. So thank you all out there for listening to the Mixtape Challenge, and thank you once again to my awesome contestants, Jamaal Green and Craig Cohen.
Oh, thank you for having me, man. It was a pleasure, guys.
Yeah, this was a blast. Thanks, guys, and we'll see you all out there next time on the Mixtape Challenge.